My mother looked me dead in the eye, dropped a grease-stained dishwashing apron onto my shoes, and told me to get back to the prep station. We were standing in the middle of our family restaurant's 10-year anniversary gala. While a dining room full of investors clapped, my parents handed the master keys and my executive chef title to my brother Julian, a man who didn't even know how to hold a knife. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 8 years to save that place from bankruptcy, and they discarded me like a broken appliance. What they did not know was that 5 years ago, I used my own savings to establish an LLC that exclusively manufactured and supplied the proprietary spice blends and base sauces for our 10 signature dishes. I provided them to the restaurant under a $0 at-will licensing agreement. By demoting me tonight, they didn't just disrespect a chef. They instantly severed their own supply chain and walked directly into a financial execution of their own making. My name is Clara. I am an executive chef. Before I continue, drop a comment with your local time and where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe to Sweet Life Drama if you have ever had your blood relatives exploit your hard work. Trust me, you will want to hear exactly how I burned their fake empire to the ground. The dining room of the Oak and Vine smelled like roasted sage and expensive champagne. I stood near the swinging kitchen doors. My chef coat was damp with sweat from expediting 70 plates of smoked lamb ribs. Out on the floor, my father Richard tapped a silver spoon against his crystal flute. The chatter of local food critics and loyal patrons faded into a respectful hush. He threw his arm around Julian. My brother wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than my monthly salary. He had not stepped foot in a kitchen all week. He spent his days playing golf and calling himself a marketing consultant. My father cleared his throat and smiled at the crowd. He announced that a decade of success required fresh vision. He said it was time to pass the torch to the next generation of leadership. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass master keys to the building. He pressed them into Julian's hand. The room erupted into applause. Julian raised his glass and soaked in the admiration. He looked like a man who had just conquered a mountain he never actually climbed. I stood frozen. I felt the heat from the kitchen radiating against my spine. I was the one who negotiated with the meat suppliers when our credit line vanished 3 years ago. I was the one who scrubbed the grease traps when we could not afford a cleaning crew. I created the menu that earned us a feature in the Chicago Tribune and brought this place back from the brink of foreclosure. My mother, Diane, separated from the clapping crowd and walked toward me. She wore a silk emerald dress funded by the holiday dinner rush I orchestrated. She stopped 2 feet away. Her eyes scanned my flour-dusted pants and my scuffed work clogs. She did not offer a hug. She did not say thank you. She reached over to a nearby service tray, picked up a spare dishwashing apron, and let it fall. It landed on the floor, hitting the tips of my shoes. "Julian wants to streamline operations," she said. Her voice was flat and measured. "He feels you lack the executive presence to run the back of house. You will transition to sous chef starting tomorrow. Your pay will be adjusted down to reflect the demotion." I stared at the wrinkled fabric on the floor. My own mother was cutting my throat in the middle of a celebration I catered. "You are giving my kitchen to a man who does not know how to hold a chef knife," I said. My tone was low. My mother let out a short, sharp sigh. She adjusted her diamond earring. "He knows how to scale a business, Clara. You just know how to cook. Know your place and help your brother succeed, or you can find another line of work. We own this restaurant." Julian noticed us talking. He handed his empty champagne flute to a passing waiter and strolled over. He did not look at my face. He looked at the apron on the floor. "I want the walk-in fridge inventoried by tomorrow morning, Clara," Julian said. His voice carried a new, practiced authority. "And cut the premium lamb from the weekend menu. We are switching to frozen cuts to improve margins." He patted my shoulder twice, a patronizing gesture aimed at a subordinate, before turning back to his guests. My mother turned her back and followed him. She left me standing in the shadows of my own creation. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene in front of the food critics. I looked at Julian laughing with the investors, raising his glass to a future he thought he owned. I bent down, picked up the stained apron and tossed it into the nearest trash bin. I untied my chef coat. I walked out the back door into the cool Chicago night alley. They thought they owned the restaurant. They did not realize they only owned the bricks. I own the soul, and I was about to lock it inside a vault they could never break open. The alley air felt sharp against my skin. I did not go home. I walked around the building and re-entered through the delivery door into the prep kitchen. The contrast hit the second the heavy steel door clicked shut. Out in the dining room, crystal glasses clinked under dim amber lighting and string quartets played soft classical covers. In here, fluorescent bulbs hummed a dying, erratic note over cracked linoleum. I looked up at the industrial hood vent stretching above the main cooking line. The right exhaust fan had been making a grinding metallic screech for 6 months, a clear safety hazard. Every time I submitted a repair invoice, my father returned it with a red line drawn through the total. Budget constraints, his yellow sticky note always read. I walked over to the prep station and ran my finger along the cold stainless steel counter. Budget constraints were a convenient fiction. Let me give you the math. The Oak and Vine pulled in $3.2 million last year. That represented a 400% revenue jump from the year I took over the kitchen. We did not achieve those numbers because of my father's outdated wine list or my mother's soaked dresses. The reservations booked out 3 months in advance because of the smoked maple lamb ribs. I spent 6 months perfecting that glaze, testing the exact ratio of cracked black pepper to dark amber syrup, smoking the meat over applewood until it separated from the bone at a glance. I created 9 other signature dishes that defined our identity. My reward for rescuing a sinking ship was a salary frozen at $45,000 a year. I worked 80-hour weeks. I negotiated with vendors to keep our supply lines open. I scrubbed the walk-in freezer on Sunday mornings. Meanwhile, the new general manager, my brother Julian, earned $130,000 annually for holding the title of marketing director. Julian's marketing strategy consisted of showing up on Thursday evenings, wearing a bespoke suit, pouring himself glasses of our most expensive Cabernet, and handing out business cards to local politicians. He averaged 3 hours of physical presence in the building per week. He did not know the wholesale cost of a crate of Roma tomatoes. He did not know the names of the dishwashers who kept the service moving. He knew how to smile and nod while the actual engine of the restaurant bled itself dry behind swinging doors. You might wonder why parents would sabotage their own thriving business to prop up an empty suit. The answer was seated at table 4 earlier that night, wearing a tailored charcoal blazer and a quiet, observing expression. Nia, Julian's wife. Nia was a senior director of human resources for a major tech firm. She carried a level of corporate authority and financial leverage my parents salivated over. To keep her family's wealth flowing into their pockets, Richard and Diane had to construct an elaborate illusion that Julian was a brilliant restaurateur worthy of her capital. They used the Oak and Vine as his stage set. I remember a Tuesday night a few months before the anniversary gala. Nia had stopped by the restaurant after a long flight from a tech conference. She sat at the chef's counter near the open kitchen. I was expediting orders, calling out ticket times, managing the chaos of a full dining room. Julian stood next to her, sipping a Pinot Noir. "The new autumn menu is reading beautifully, Julian," Nia said, tracing a finger down a leather-bound list. The pistachio-crusted halibut was a brilliant pivot for the season. Julian smiled, swirling his wine. "Thanks, babe. I spent weeks conceptualizing the flavor profiles. It was a risk, but I knew the local demographic was ready for something elevated." I stood 3 feet away, holding a searing hot cast-iron pan. I was the one who sourced the pistachios from a boutique farm in California. I was the one who tested 13 different crust binders until the texture snapped perfectly under a fork. Julian had tasted it once, complained it needed more salt, and walked away. I looked at Nia. Her eyes met mine. She offered a polite professional nod, the kind you give to a competent employee keeping the gears turning. She had no reason to doubt her husband. She saw the packed dining room. She saw the glowing Yelp reviews praising the innovative menu. She saw Julian standing in a designer suit, accepting compliments from the mayor at table 6. My mother materialized next to Julian, placing a hand on Nia's shoulder. "Julian works so hard for us," Diane crooned. "He has his father's business mind. We're just lucky he has a supportive wife to come home to." I turned back to the stove. The heat blistered my forearms. I realized then that my exhaustion was the currency funding their performance. I was the unseen mechanic keeping the sports car running so Julian could sit in the driver's seat and impress his wealthy wife. If I stopped cooking, the illusion shattered. If the illusion shattered, Nia would look closely at the books. If she looked at the books, the flow of her family's money would stop. The depth of their parasitic reliance became undeniable. 3 weeks before the anniversary party, I received a phone call from our primary meat purveyor. He halted our deliveries. 2 invoices totaling $8,000 were 30 days past due. I marched into the back office and pulled up the operating account. The money was gone. A withdrawal had been authorized the previous week by Julian. I found my father in the dining room adjusting table settings. I dropped the printed bank statement on the white linen. "Julian pulled $8,000 from the operating account," I said. "Our meat supplier just cut us off. We have a fully booked weekend and no lamb." My father did not look at the paper. He adjusted a silver fork. "Keep your voice down, Clara. Julian needed to secure a lease on the new Porsche. Nia's colleagues are hosting a charity golf tournament this weekend. He needs to arrive in something appropriate. It is an investment in networking." "He stole vendor funds for a car lease," I stated, staring at his hands. "How do you expect me to serve dinner on Friday?" "You are creative," my father said, finally looking up. His eyes held no apology, only cold expectation. "Figure out a cheaper cut of meat. Make a stew. You are the chef, Clara. Manage the kitchen and let Julian manage the business." I had paid the vendor from my own meager personal savings that afternoon to keep the doors open. I did not do it for them. I did it because the kitchen staff relied on their paychecks to feed their own kids. Now, standing in the empty prep kitchen after the anniversary party, the memory of that $8,000 theft tasted like ash. My parents thought handing Julian the master keys tonight was the final stroke of their masterpiece. They believed they had permanently secured Nia's investments by making him the official head of the empire in front of a room full of witnesses. They figured I would simply swallow the demotion, retreat to the prep station, and keep the engine humming out of fear and obligation. They assumed my silence over the years equaled submission. I walked over to the stainless steel lockbox secured to the wall near the manager's office. It held the master recipe binder, the physical copy. I punched in the 4-digit code. The heavy metal door popped open. I took the binder out. It was thick, filled with hundreds of pages of laminated notes, precise measurements, spice ratios, and proprietary sourcing contacts. The actual DNA of the oak and vine. I did not rip the pages. I did not throw it in the fryer. Vandalism is for amateurs. I simply placed the binder into my canvas tote bag. My mother had told me to know my place. Julian had ordered me to switch to frozen cuts to improve his margins. I was going to let them. I zipped the bag closed, turned off the flickering fluorescent lights, and walked back out into the cold alley. Tuesday morning. The prep kitchen smells like roasted garlic, fresh thyme, and bleached countertops. Tuesday is delivery day, the heartbeat of the week. I arrive at 6 to inspect the incoming produce. I do not trust the suppliers to cull the bruised heirloom tomatoes, and I certainly do not trust anyone else to check the marbling on the ribeye cuts. The kitchen is my sanctuary. The stainless steel tables gleam under the harsh fluorescent lights. The hum of the walk-in refrigerator provides a steady, reliable rhythm. By 8, the line is moving. David, my lead sous chef, is reducing a veal stock that has been simmering for 12 hours. The rich, deep scent fills the room. Matteo, the second sous chef, is precisely slicing wild mushrooms. These 2 men are the backbone of my operation. David has worked the line with me for 4 years. He knows my plating standards by instinct. Matteo has a newborn daughter at home and pulls double shifts every weekend to cover his rent. They work with a focused, silent efficiency. At 9, the heavy double doors at the front of the kitchen swing open. Julian walks in. He does not belong in this room, and his posture broadcasts it. He wears a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and Italian leather loafers that have never touched a sticky floor. He holds a leather-bound clipboard against his chest. He does not nod to the dishwashers. He avoids looking at the prep cooks. He walks directly toward the center island where David and Mateo are working. I wipe my hands on a side towel and step away from the expediting station. I place myself between my brother and my crew. Julian stops. He taps a silver pen against the clipboard. The metallic clicking cuts through the ambient noise of the kitchen. "Gather around, please," Julian says. His voice is smooth, projected from the diaphragm. It is the voice of a corporate consultant delivering a seminar, not a restaurant manager speaking to his staff. The chopping stops. The kitchen goes quiet. The only sound remaining is the erratic screech of the broken exhaust fan overhead. Julian looks at David, then at Mateo. "We are restructuring the back-of-house operations to align with our new revenue targets. Your positions have been eliminated, effective immediately. You can collect your final paychecks from the front office." David stares at him, a half-peeled onion still resting in his palm. Mateo wipes his hands on his apron, his jaw tightening. Neither man speaks. I step forward, closing the distance between Julian and myself. "You do not have the authority to fire my kitchen staff." Julian sighs. He adjusts his suit jacket with his free hand. "I am the general manager, Clara. I have the authority to fire anyone I choose. Our operating costs are bloated. The margins are unacceptable. We are bleeding capital on premium labor for prep work that a culinary student could execute for minimum wage. David and Mateo run the line when I am expediting," I say, my tone dropping lower, forcing him to listen. "They ensure the consistency of the food. If you cut them, the service collapses by Friday night." "The service will adapt," Julian replies. He checks his watch, a gold Rolex he bought last month. Before I can tell him exactly what he can do with his watch, the double doors push open again. My parents enter. They move together, a coordinated arrival. My mother, Diane, wears a pristine cream cashmere sweater draped over her shoulders. My father, Richard, holds his personalized ceramic coffee mug. They look rested. They look like people who slept a full 8 hours in a climate-controlled bedroom while I was here at midnight scrubbing grease traps. They flank Julian, a united front. "Tell him he cannot terminate my core team," I say, looking directly at my father. "We have a fully booked dining room for the weekend. We cannot execute the menu shorthanded." Richard takes a slow sip of his coffee. He looks at the ceiling, then at Julian, and finally at me. "Julian makes the operational decisions now, Clara. We discussed this restructuring at the anniversary gala. You need to respect the chain of command." Diane steps forward. She does not raise her voice. She does not look defensive. Instead, her face softens into a mask of patronizing pity. It is the exact expression she used when I was 10 years old and dropped a glass of milk on the floor. "Clara, honey," Diane murmurs. She crosses her arms, ensuring the cashmere stays perfectly positioned. "You need to take a breath. You are letting your emotions cloud your business judgment. You only know how to cook. You lack the leadership vision your brother possesses." Julian understands overhead. He understands scalability. You should focus on your recipes and leave the big picture to him. Scalability. The word hangs in the air, heavy and artificial. Julian flips a page on his clipboard, emboldened by their presence. "Speaking of recipes, we are streamlining the menu. I have already canceled the fresh seafood and premium meat deliveries for the remainder of the quarter. I signed a vendor agreement this morning with a bulk supplier. We are switching to a frozen supply chain. Pre-portioned cuts. Pre-made base sauces. It will reduce our food costs by 40%. I stare at the clipboard, then at his immaculate shoes, then at my parents. "You are going to serve frozen steaks and jarred sauce to people paying $80 a plate," I state. "People pay for the ambiance," Diane chimes in, waving a manicured hand toward the dining room doors. "They pay for the prestige of dining at the Oak and Vine. They will not notice a minor adjustment in the ingredient sourcing. You will simply adjust your seasoning to accommodate the new inventory. Be a team player." "Know your place, Clara," Richard adds, His patience is thinning. The gentle father routine fades, revealing the cold expectation beneath. This is not a negotiation. You are an employee. You will do what the general manager instructs, and you will make the frozen ingredients work, or we will find a line cook who can follow directions. I look at the three of them. They stand shoulder to shoulder, radiating quiet triumph. They have orchestrated this morning ambush with precision. They brought the clipboard, the corporate buzzwords, and the threat of replacement to remind me that I am merely an instrument for their wealth. They assume I will fold. They believe that cooking in this specific building is the only identity I possess. They think I am tethered to them by fear and obligation. They are waiting for the explosion. They expect me to shout. They want me to throw a pan across the room, to cry about fairness, to beg them to reconsider. If I cry, they win the emotional high ground. If I scream, they can dismiss me as hysterical. The kitchen is dead silent. The prep cooks have stopped moving. The dishwashers linger near the sinks, holding their breath. I look at David. He gives me a short, barely perceptible nod. He understands. I look at Mateo. He stares at the floor, but he knows this fight is over. I turn my attention back to my family. I reach behind my neck. I untie the tight knot of my apron strings. The thick, stained cotton fabric loosens. I pull the loop over my head. Next to the prep station sits a deep industrial metal disposal bin. It holds 50 gallons of used, dark fryer oil waiting for the recycling truck. The smell of burnt fat and charred remnants is pungent. I do not fold the apron. I do not hand it to Julian. I do not throw it on the clean counter. I hold it over the bin, open my hand, and drop it straight into the black grease. The heavy fabric sinks into the vat with a thick, wet slurp. Dark, viscous droplets splatter onto the stainless steel rim. Diane gasps, stumbling backward a step, pulling her cashmere tight against her chest, as if the oil might leap out and soil her. Julian flinches, dropping his silver pen. It hits the floor tiles and rolls under a prep table. "Clara, what on earth are you doing?" Richard demands. His voice cracks. The calm, authoritative facade shatters instantly. I ignore him. I reach for the top button of my white chef coat. I unbutton it, then the next. I slide the heavy coat off my shoulders, exposing the plain black t-shirt underneath. I let the coat fall directly onto the wet floor. Julian stares at the ruined apron sinking into the oil, then at my face. The smugness has evaporated from his eyes, replaced by a sudden creeping confusion. The clipboard trembles slightly in his grip. "Good luck with the frozen ingredients," I say. My voice does not shake. I do not wait for a response. I turn my back on them and walk toward the rear exit. "Clara, you walk out that door and you are done here!" My father shouts. His voice echoes off the tiled walls, desperate and loud. I do not break my stride. I push the heavy metal bar of the delivery door. It opens, letting in the sharp, cold morning air and the distant sound of city traffic. I step out onto the loading dock and let the heavy steel door slam shut behind me. The deadbolt clicks into place, a sharp metallic snap echoing through the brick corridor. I leave them standing in the fluorescent glare, staring at a vat of dirty oil, holding the keys to an empire they have no idea how to run. The night air bites at my exposed arms, carrying the scent of damp concrete and distant exhaust fumes. I walk to my car, parked under a flickering streetlight, unlock it, and slide into the driver's seat. For a moment, the cold, precise clarity fractures. I drop my forehead against the freezing steering wheel and let out a long, shaky breath. The adrenaline recedes, leaving behind the crushing weight of 8 lost years. I lift my head and look through the windshield at the frosted glass of the prep kitchen. The amber light spilling into the alley is the only illumination I have known for my entire 20s. My youth, my sweat, my undivided loyalty, all left on the floor next to a stained apron. I stare at that light until my vision blurs. Then I wipe my eyes, grip the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turn white, and pull my phone from my pocket. The mourning period is over. My thumb hovers over my recent contacts. Julian, Diane, Richard. I select my brother's profile, scroll to the bottom, block this caller. I repeat the sequence for my mother, then my father. 3 distinct taps. I do not draft a lengthy paragraph detailing my grievances. I do not demand an apology. Explanations are gifts reserved for people capable of understanding them. By severing the connection without a single word, I reclaim the airspace they have occupied for 32 years. I turn the ignition. The engine hums. Pulling out of the alley, I merge onto the main avenue heading toward downtown Chicago. The skyline rises in the distance, sharp glass and steel piercing the gray clouds. My mind rewinds to a crisp November afternoon 5 years ago. I was 27, auditing the quarterly vendor logs in the back office because my father claimed he was too busy. I opened a desk drawer searching for a missing invoice. Instead, I found a stack of bank notices bound by a thick rubber band. Foreclosure warnings, second mortgage drawdowns, credit line max-outs. The numbers were staggering. 6 figures of equity drained from the property in a matter of months. I dug deeper. I matched the withdrawal dates against Julian's social media posts. The weekend trips to Las Vegas, the sudden acquisition of vintage Rolex watches, the underground poker games in River North he bragged about to the bartenders. My parents were quietly mortgaging the restaurant's foundation to cover his gambling debts. They were risking the livelihood of 20 employees, risking my grueling 80-hour work weeks to maintain the illusion of Julian's success. Sitting in that cramped office 5 years ago, a cold realization settled in my chest. They would let the ship sink as long as Julian got to stand on the highest deck. I needed a lifeboat. The next morning, I took the train into the financial district. I walked into the lobby of a high-rise firm and rode the elevator to the 38th floor. I sat across from Bennett Cole, a senior intellectual property litigator. His office smelled of leather, floor wax, and expensive espresso. I placed a thick binder on his mahogany desk. It contained the exact chemical breakdowns, the spice ratios, the curing times, and the sourcing contacts for every signature dish that made the Oak and Vine profitable. I want to lock these down, I told him. Bennett reviewed the binder. His eyes scanned the precise measurements I had spent years perfecting. He explained that general recipes are almost impossible to copyright.
But supply chains and trade secrets, Bennett said, are a fortress.
We established a standalone entity, Clara Culinary Holdings, LLC. I became the sole manufacturer and distributor of the restaurant's core flavor profiles. I personally mixed the spice rubs and base sauces in a rented commercial commissary kitchen off-site, never allowing the prep cooks to see the raw ratios. I then supplied these proprietary blends to the Oak and Vine under a verbal at-will vendor agreement for exactly $0. As long as they employed me, they got the lifeblood of their menu for free. A license I could revoke the exact second the arrangement ceased to serve me. For half a decade, I watched my family parade around the dining room, shaking hands with the mayor, buying new cars, and acting as though their business acumen kept the lights on. I swallowed their condescension. I let them believe they were the architects of the empire. I did it while holding the detonator in my back pocket. The Bluetooth icon flashes on my dashboard screen, bringing me back to the present. I dial Bennett's direct line. He answers on the first ring. Clara. His voice is crisp, unbothered by the early hour. Bennett, I say, keeping my eyes fixed on the taillights ahead. The verbal licensing agreement with the Oak and Vine is terminated. Execute the contingency protocol. He does not ask for the emotional backstory. He does not ask if I need time to think. He understands the mechanics of leverage. Expedited delivery? He asks. Yes. Target the general manager's desk. I disconnect the call. The silence in the car feels different now. It feels expansive. It feels lethal. Wednesday morning arrives. I am sitting at my kitchen island drinking black coffee, but I know exactly how the sequence unfolds at the restaurant. Julian arrives at 9. He settles into the leather chair in the manager's office, the chair he believes grants him authority. He opens his laptop. He adjusts his tailored cuffs, preparing for another day of doing nothing while extracting everything. At 9:30, a bonded courier walks through the front doors. The courier bypasses the host stand and approaches the office. He carries a rigid, tamper-proof envelope demanding a direct signature. Julian signs the digital pad. likely assuming it is a VIP event invitation or an expensive vendor sample. He tears the perforated edge. He extracts a thick stack of heavy bond paper. The letterhead reads Cole & Associates, Intellectual Property and Corporate Litigation. It is a formal cease and desist mandate. The language is surgical, devoid of any familial warmth. It addresses Julian and the ownership group of the Oak and Vine as unauthorized infringing parties. The document outlines the immediate termination of the vendor supply agreement with Clara Culinary Holdings, LLC. It isn't just a warning, it is a supply chain execution. The demands leave no room for negotiation. The restaurant is legally barred from utilizing any remaining inventory of my proprietary spice rubs or sauces and must immediately remove the 10 foundational items from their printed menus and digital grids. The final paragraph is the kill shot. Bennett has drafted a brutal anti-reverse engineering clause. If Julian's new kitchen staff attempts to deconstruct, analyze, or imitate my specific chemical flavor profiles to sell under the same menu names, Clara Culinary Holdings will initiate an immediate lawsuit for the theft of trade secrets, seeking damages of $500,000 and a total operational injunction. Julian reads the first page. The arrogant smirk vanishes. He flips to the second page. The heavy bond paper begins to tremble violently in his grip. He reaches blindly for the glass of expensive Cabernet he poured himself at 10 in the morning, a habit he adopted to feel like a powerful executive. But his hand is shaking so badly that his knuckles clip the crystal stem. The glass tips. A dark crimson wave cascades off the mahogany desk and splashes directly onto the lapel of his $1,000 tailored suit. He does not even try to wipe it. He stands, paralyzed, staring at the red stain spreading across the charcoal wool. The reality of his new empire crashes down on him. His chest heaves, pulling in sharp, shallow breaths as the panic sets in. He is hyperventilating in the center of his own office. He owns the building, the tables, and the broken exhaust fan, but he no longer owns the food. He grabs his phone, his fingers slick with sweat and spilled wine as he dials my number. Blocked. He dials again. Blocked. Completely spiraling, he desperately pulls up Nia's contact. He presses call, pacing the stained carpet, gasping for air, praying his wealthy wife will pick up the phone and somehow save him from the financial execution he just walked into. He hangs up. He dials again. He texts. Delivery failed. He tries calling from the restaurant landline. Blocked. The silence I initiated in my car 24 hours earlier has mutated. It is no longer a mere absence of communication. It is a fortified wall. He is standing at the helm of a sinking ship, holding a set of master keys that unlock nothing but empty rooms. Friday evening at the Oak and Vine always possessed a specific rhythm. At 6 o'clock, the ambient lighting dimmed. The jazz playlist hummed through the concealed speakers. The hostess began seating the early reservations, mostly local business owners and affluent retirees. By 7, the dining room would hit maximum capacity. The air would fill with the clinking of crystal stems and the low, steady murmur of expensive conversations. It was a well-oiled machine built on the foundation of my menu. Julian assumed the machine ran on its own momentum. He believed the 48-hour compliance window on the cease and desist letter was a bluff. He thought my intellectual property claims were the desperate empty threats of a bitter sibling. He was about to learn a difference between holding a title and holding the actual reins. He had hired a replacement that morning. A 20-something line cook named Kevin, poached from a mid-tier corporate steakhouse down the highway. Julian had handed Kevin a clipboard containing the adjusted menu and the keys to the walk-in freezer. He instructed the new cook to replicate my smoked maple lamb ribs using a generic recipe downloaded from the internet and the new bulk-ordered frozen meat. Julian figured protein was protein. He assumed a little sugar and smoke would mask any discrepancy in quality. I know exactly how the failure unfolded because David, my former lead sous chef, was sitting at the corner of the bar nursing a beer. He had come in to collect his final paycheck and decided to stay to watch the collision. He texted me the play-by-play. The first ticket for the lamb printed at 6:15. In my kitchen, that dish relied entirely on the proprietary dry rub I supplied through my LLC. A precise chemical balance of smoked Spanish paprika, dark brown sugar, and finely ground espresso. Without my sealed vacuum bags of spice, Julian's new chef was flying blind. Kevin pulled rock-hard, pre-portioned lamb racks from a plastic bag. He threw them under a broiler. The frozen moisture leached out, causing the meat to boil in a pool of its own gray liquid. Knowing he couldn't legally reverse engineer my exact rub, even if he knew how, Kevin panicked. He brushed the meat heavily with commercial pancake syrup and liquid smoke, tossing them back under the heat until the sugar carbonized into a bitter black shell. A server carried the first 2 orders out to table 4. 10 minutes later, the swinging doors to the kitchen kicked open. The server walked back in, holding both plates. He bypassed the dishwashing station and set them directly on the expediting counter in front of Julian. "Table 4 says it tastes like burnt rubber," the server announced. "They want the halibut instead." Julian adjusted his silk tie. He stared at the pale, stiff meat resting in a puddle of watery grease. He told Kevin to refire the lamb, assuming it was a single operational error. He told the server to offer table 4 a complimentary round of drinks. By 7 o'clock, the ticket machine was spitting out a continuous stream of orders. The dining room was packed. People were ordering their favorites. They expected the standard they had paid for over the last 8 years. The swinging doors began to function like a revolving turnstile of rejection. A waiter brought back 3 plates of the pistachio-crusted halibut. The frozen fish had seized under the heat, turning the texture to chalk, and Kevin had used stale peanuts instead of the boutique pistachios I sourced from California. Another server returned with 2 bowls of my signature wild mushroom risotto. It was cold in the center and tasted like salted paste. 47 plates of food were returned to the kitchen within the first 2 hours of service. David texted me that the atmosphere in the dining room shifted from relaxed luxury to visible irritation. The smooth murmur of conversation fractured into sharp complaints. Waiters were apologizing profusely, their faces flushed, their tip percentages evaporating. Mr. Sterling, a regular customer who spent $200 every Friday, took 1 bite of his lamb, stood up, dropped a $50 bill on the table for the wine, and walked out the front door without saying a word to the management. Julian spent the first hour hovering over Kevin, barking orders, demanding faster ticket times. He told the cook to just push the food out. Kevin threw down his tongs, yelled that he could not magically fix frozen garbage without a prep sheet, and threatened to walk out mid-shift. Julian had to back down. He retreated to the dining room to run damage control. He walked from table to table, offering forced smiles and free desserts. He blamed supply chain issues. He blamed a new software glitch in the kitchen ticketing system. He lied with the smooth practice ease of a man who had lied his entire life. But customers spending $100 a head do not care about supply chain excuses. They care about what is on the plate. At 7:30, the digital fallout began. I sat on my living room sofa, my laptop open on the coffee table. I refreshed the Yelp page for the Oaken Vine. The algorithm updates in near real time. A 1-star review populated at the top of the feed. The title read, "Tastes like garbage. Where's the old chef?" The user detailed how their anniversary dinner was ruined by meat that required a saw to cut and service that felt like a chaotic diner. 5 minutes later, another 1-star review appeared. "Did ownership change hands tonight? Unedible. Do not waste your money here." Then a third, a fourth, a cascade of public humiliation broadcasting to the entire city. The pristine 4.8-star rating I had bled for over 8 years began to plummet. The reality of the cease and desist letter finally pierced Julian's arrogance. The paper on his desk was not a negotiation tactic. It was a structural load-bearing wall, and I had just detonated it. He realized that without my intellectual property, the restaurant possessed no value. The oak tables and the crystal glasses were just a stage. I was the one who wrote the script, and I had taken it with me. The era of panic officially commenced. I had blocked the personal cell phones of Julian, my mother, and my father. They realized this quickly. They could not text me their demands. They could not call me to scream. The silence I had built was impenetrable from their usual avenues of attack. So they improvised. My phone sat on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up. An incoming call from the restaurant's main landline. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, an incoming call from the host stand extension. I let it ring. Then a call from a number I did not recognize, likely the personal cell phone of a terrified waiter Julian had commandeered. I watched the screen illuminate, fade to black, and illuminate again. The rhythm was frantic. It was the digital pulse of a sinking ship. Over the course of 3 hours, I received 68 missed calls. My text message inbox flooded with 142 messages from various unknown numbers, all variations of the same desperate plea. "Clara, pick up the phone right now. Call Julian immediately. This is not funny. Call the restaurant." I did not touch the phone. I walked to my wine rack. I pulled a bottle of dark Pinot Noir, a vintage I had bought to celebrate the day I finally paid off my culinary school loans. I sliced the foil, inserted the corkscrew, and pulled. The cork emerged with a satisfying, deep pop. I poured a generous measure into a wide glass. I carried the wine back to the counter, unlocked my phone, and opened the voicemail inbox. I pressed play on speakerphone. The first message was from Diane. The background noise was chaotic, the clattering of plates and the shouts of angry waiters. Her voice retained its usual edge of maternal authority, attempting to command obedience through sheer habit. "Clara, this is your mother. Stop this childish game right now. Julian is doing his best, but the kitchen is overwhelmed. You need to get in your car, come through the back door, and fix this menu. We are a family. You do not abandon your family on a Friday night. Call me back the second you hear this." I took a slow sip of the wine. The tannins were structured, the finish smooth. The next voicemail was left 40 minutes later. The tone had shifted. The authority had cracked, revealing the raw fear beneath the cashmere sweater. "Clara, please. It is Mom again. Mr. Sterling just walked out. Table 7 is refusing to pay their bill. The new cook does not know how to render the fat on the lamb. Just text Julian the spice ratio. You do not even have to come in. Just send him the recipe for the rub so we can get through the next hour. You are being unreasonable." I let the automated voice announce the time of the next message. 8:15. This one was from Julian. He sounded out of breath. The smooth corporate marketing director persona had vanished. "Clara, listen to me. I will authorize overtime pay. I will double your hourly rate for tonight. Just get down here. The Yelp reviews are tanking. Nia's colleagues are supposed to dine here next week, and I cannot serve them this garbage. You are going to ruin my reputation. Pick up the damn phone." I smiled. He still thought this was a negotiation about an hourly wage. He still believed my compliance could be purchased for a few extra dollars, completely missing the fact that I now owned the very leverage he was trying to buy. The final voicemail was recorded just past 9 o'clock. The dinner service was effectively over. The dining room was likely empty, filled only with bussers clearing half-eaten food and full wine glasses. It was Diane again. The background noise was gone. There was no clattering. There was only a hollow, echoing silence. She was crying. Not the calculated tears she used to manipulate my father, but genuine, breathless panic. "Clara." She gasped for air. "We are issuing refunds, thousands of dollars in refunds. The host stand phone will not stop ringing with cancellations for next month. People are reading the reviews. You are destroying us. You are destroying your own family. We are going to lose the business. Please, please just answer the phone." The message ended. The automated voice offered to replay or delete. I did not press a button. I stood in my quiet, safe apartment. I looked out the window at the city lights of Chicago. The frantic desperation in my mother's voice did not trigger guilt. It did not make me reach for my car keys. For the first time in my life, their emergency was not my responsibility. They had spent years telling me I was nothing but a subordinate, a replaceable pair of hands in the kitchen. Tonight, they learned exactly what the building looked like without its foundation. I raised my glass to the empty room, took another sip of the red wine, and let the silence stretch out, perfect and unbroken. Saturday morning. The sun sits low over the Chicago skyline, casting long, sharp shadows across the hardwood floor of my apartment. My phone remains a dark, silent rectangle resting on a kitchen counter. The block list holds firm. In my parents' minds, I am currently sitting on my faded sofa, calculating how many weeks of rent I can squeeze from my meager savings.
They assume I'm staring at the ceiling, regretting my sudden insubordination, waiting for Monday morning to roll around so I can crawl back to the prep kitchen and beg for my job. They believe leverage only belongs to the people whose names are printed on the building lease. I am not on the sofa. I am standing in front of my hallway mirror, buttoning a tailored charcoal blazer. I slide my feet into leather boots, grab my keys, and walk out the door. 10 o'clock, the private dining room at the Langham Hotel downtown.
The room smells of polished mahogany, expensive leather, and dark roast espresso. The man sitting at the head of the long table does not wear suits. Elias Thorne wears a plain black cashmere sweater and a vintage Patek Philippe watch. He owns 7 Michelin-starred establishments across the Midwest. He is a phantom in the culinary world, a ruthless investor who can kill a restaurant concept with a single, softly spoken sentence. Elias has a thick manila folder resting next to his coffee cup. He doesn't offer small talk. He opens the folder and slides a printed photograph across the table. It is a high-resolution shot of my smoked maple lamb ribs. But it is not a photo from the oaken vine. It is a deconstructed version, plated differently. "Your brother," Elias says, his voice gravelly and calm, "attempted to pitch me on an investment partnership 14 months ago." He walked into my office carrying a thermal container of this exact dish. He sat in the chair you are sitting in right now and claimed he developed the flavor profile himself. He said he was the creative engine of the family business. I stare at the photo. My jaw tightens, but I remain silent. "I tasted the meat," Elias continues, picking up his espresso cup. Then I asked him a simple technical question. I asked what specific wood he used for the smoking process. Julian looked me right in the eye, flashed a brilliant salesman smile, and said hickory. Elias takes a slow sip of his coffee. I knew immediately he was lying. That distinct sweetness profile only comes from aged applewood. Julian is a hollow suit who doesn't even understand the product he is claiming to sell. So I rejected his pitch. He closes the folder. "But the food was exceptional," Elias says. I don't ignore exceptional food. I started sending my people to the oaken vine. They sat at the bar. They watched the open kitchen. They saw a woman working the line, expediting tickets, managing food costs, and carrying the entire operation on her back while the supposed marketing director drank Pinot Noir with the mayor. "I have been watching you for 2 years, Clara. This is the shadow ally. Not a random savior appearing from nowhere, but a silent observer who deals in competence and recognizes the actual foundation of an empire." Elias pulls a second document from his briefcase, high-grade bond paper stapled at the corner. "I am opening a new concept in the West Loop," he states, sliding the document toward me. 8,000 square feet of prime real estate, a kitchen build-out budget of $500,000, custom French ranges, dry-aging lockers for the beef, a dedicated pastry wing. You will never have to ask permission to fix a broken exhaust fan again. I look down at the heavy paper. I do not want another employee, Clara. I want a partner who knows how to bleed for the craft without making excuses. Elias taps the top page. $1.5 million in operating capital, executive chef title, and a 20% equity stake in the LLC. You run the back of house. I handle the real estate and the investors. Julian gets to play restaurant manager in the suburbs while you build something permanent. I read the clauses. The language is ironclad. It is not just a job offer, it is an ascension. "I need a partner," Elias repeats, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But I also need to know you are entirely detached from the dead weight. Families like yours do not let go easily. When they realize they are bankrupt, they will weaponize guilt. They will stand on your doorstep, cry, and demand loyalty. If I hand you 20% of a multi-million-dollar venture today, I need unshakable certainty that you will not funnel my profits to save your father's fragile ego tomorrow." I meet his gaze. I do not blink. "Elias, 4 days ago, my mother handed me a dirty dishwashing apron in front of 50 investors. I dropped it into a vat of boiling fryer oil, walked out the back door, and served them a cease and desist that effectively shut down their entire revenue stream. I didn't walk away to teach them a lesson.
I walked away to watch them drown. Elias stares at me for a long, silent moment. A rare, approving smile touches the corner of his mouth. He reaches into his jacket pocket and slides a heavy silver pen across the polished table. "The kitchen designers need your approval on the floor plan by Tuesday," he says. I pick up the pen. The metal is cold and solid against my fingers. I sign my name on the solid black line. The ink dries instantly. I am no longer a forgotten kitchen worker fighting for a living wage. I am an owner. While I sit in a private suite overlooking the Chicago River, discussing custom ventilation systems, the reality at the Oak and Vine is starkly different. It is 11 o'clock in the morning. The Saturday delivery truck is idling in the alley behind the restaurant. Richard is standing on the concrete loading dock. He is not holding a silver pen. He is holding a dead corporate credit card. The regional meat supplier, a man named Russo, who has tolerated my father's late payments for 3 years entirely out of respect for my kitchen management, is shaking his head. "Cash on delivery, Richard," Russo says, leaning against the back of his refrigerated truck.
Clara called me Wednesday. She said she is no longer managing the accounts. Your credit line was based on her word, her consistency, not yours. The card declined. No cash, no stakes. Richard's face flushes a deep, angry crimson. He looks at the stacks of premium beef sitting just out of reach inside the dark truck. He needs that meat for the Saturday night dinner rush. Without it, the dining room will be a ghost town by 7 o'clock. "I am the owner of this establishment," Richard barks, his voice tight with rising panic. "You will leave those boxes on this dock, or I will take my business elsewhere." Russo doesn't argue. He doesn't negotiate. He just hits the hydraulic lift button. The heavy metal door slides shut, sealing the meat inside. He gets into the cab and drives away, leaving my father standing in the smell of exhaust fumes, clutching a useless piece of plastic. Inside the restaurant, Diane is sitting in the cramped, windowless manager's office. She is dialing local grocery stores, trying to reserve bulk chicken breasts to salvage the evening menu. The woman who wore emerald silk and sipped champagne 2 nights ago is now begging a supermarket manager to hold 30 pounds of poultry on a weekend. I step out of the Langham into the crisp afternoon air. The Chicago wind cuts off the lake, sharp and invigorating. The signed contract rests heavy in my leather bag. My phone vibrates in my coat pocket, a text message from David. He is officially off the payroll, but he still talks to the bartenders who are setting up for the day. "Julian is spiraling," David writes. "He just locked himself in the office. The walls are thin. He is screaming on the phone." I stop walking. The rush of city traffic fades into the background. Julian is out of options. The vendors have cut him off. The signature menu is illegal to serve. The dining room is bleeding customers. He is desperate, and desperate men return to their only remaining well. He is asking Nia for a 6-figure cash injection to cover the impending payroll and the vendor debts. A second text from David appears on my screen. He begged her for $200,000, told her the bank made a technical error with the accounts and he needs emergency liquidity. I stare at the screen. A cold, sharp anticipation settles in my chest. Julian thinks he can manipulate a corporate HR executive the same way he manipulates our parents. He thinks Nia will just wire the funds blindly to protect her husband's pride and maintain their lifestyle. A third text arrives. Nia said no. She told him she is hiring an independent auditor to review the restaurant's ledgers before she transfers a single dime. Julian just threw a chair against the wall. I lock my phone and slip it back into my pocket. I look up at the towering glass skyscrapers surrounding me. Julian didn't just fail to secure the money. He just handed the keys to his own destruction over to a woman who deals in facts, data, and ruthless corporate efficiency. He invited a shart to examine financial books he has been treating as his personal slush fund for 3 years. The restaurant is already dead. The audit is just going to provide the autopsy. Monday morning brings a specific kind of silence to a failing restaurant. It is not the quiet of preparation. It is the hollow sound of an engine running dry. Julian sat in the cramped back office of the Oak and Vine, staring at a stack of vendor invoices printed on bright pink paper. The color indicated final notice. The meat supplier demanded $8,000. The linen service required $4,000. The local produce distributor had frozen the account pending a $2,000 wire transfer. The weekend service had been a financial slaughter. Refunds outpaced revenue by a ratio of 3-to-1. The cash reserves were gone. Julian picked up his silver pen and tapped it against the mahogany desk. He could not charm his way out of a broken supply chain. He could not pour an expensive glass of wine for a debt collector. He needed capital, and he needed it before the Friday dinner service, or the doors would lock permanently. He had one remaining lifeline. He drove his Porsche back to the luxury high-rise condo in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The unit belonged to his wife. Nia had purchased the $3 million property before they even met. Julian parked in the underground garage, rode the private elevator to the penthouse level, and rehearsed his face in the mirrored doors. He needed to project the image of a burdened leader, a man fighting to save his family legacy from an unhinged, greedy sibling. Nia sat at the sprawling marble dining table. She wore a tailored black blazer over a silk blouse, her laptop open, reviewing compliance documents for her technology firm. She possessed a sharp, analytical beauty. Her intelligence was the kind that scanned a room and calculated the power dynamics in under 10 seconds. Julian poured himself a glass of sparkling water, walked over, and placed a hand on her shoulder. He let out a long, heavy sigh. Nia did not look up from her screen. She finished typing a sentence, hit send on an email, and closed her laptop. Julian sat across from her. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the marble. He spun a narrative built on careful omissions. He told Nia that the weekend service had hit a minor operational snag because my sudden departure had disrupted the kitchen rhythm. He claimed I was bitter about his promotion to general manager. He said I was trying to extort the family. According to his story, I had stolen the proprietary recipe books and was demanding a 6-figure ransom to return the intellectual property. The business is solid, Julian lied, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. The revenue model is perfect, but Clara essentially froze our operating accounts with a frivolous legal injunction. The bank is holding our credit line hostage while the lawyers sort it out. I need to bridge the gap for the next month to keep the staff paid and the vendors delivering. He asked her for $200,000. He called it a temporary cash injection. He promised to repay it with interest the moment the legal dispute cleared. Nia watched him. She did not react with shock. She did not offer a comforting embrace. She was a senior director of human resources. She terminated corporate executives who tried to hide embezzlement behind marketing jargon. She recognized the scent of a panicked man. I understand, Nia said. Her tone was measured, betraying zero emotion. $200,000 is a significant transfer. My family trust requires standard due diligence for any capital withdrawal of that size. Send me the login credentials for the restaurant's QuickBooks account. I will have my personal accountant verify the top-line revenue from the past quarter to satisfy the trust officers. I will authorize the wire transfer this afternoon once the numbers match your projections. Julian felt a surge of triumph. He assumed his wife was simply checking boxes to appease her family's wealth managers. He believed he had hidden his tracks well enough to survive a cursory glance at a balance sheet. He wrote the login credentials on a piece of paper, slid it across the marble table, kissed her cheek, and drove back to the restaurant feeling like a conqueror. He had vastly underestimated the woman he married. Nia did not pass the credentials to a family trust officer. She passed them to an independent forensic auditor she kept on retainer for corporate mergers. She instructed the auditor to bypass the top-line revenue and dig directly into the categorical expenditures from the last 36 months. She wanted the receipts, the wire destinations, and the payroll discrepancies. I was standing in the empty concrete shell of Elias Thorne's new West Loop property on Tuesday afternoon. I held a clipboard, comparing the plumbing layout to the kitchen blueprints. My phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. The caller ID displayed Nia's name. I assumed Julian had successfully manipulated her. I braced myself for a tense conversation where my sister-in-law would demand I drop the cease and desist order to save the family peace. I answered the call, preparing to hold my ground. Clara, Nia said. Her voice was not angry.
It was ice. "Hello, Nia. I am looking at a forensic audit of your family's restaurant," she stated, skipping to pleasantries.
Julian asked me for $200,000 yesterday. He told me you were extorting him. He told me the business was a victim of your jealousy. I looked up at the exposed steel beams of my future kitchen. He is lying. I know, Nia replied. The words hit like a hammer strike. I spent the last 4 hours reviewing the general ledger with an auditor. I see the math, Clara. I see everything. She did not wait for me to explain. She laid out the autopsy of the business. The auditor had uncovered a systematic draining of the operating funds. Julian had not simply taken a generous salary. He had siphoned $400,000 out of the restaurant over a 3-year period. He funneled the money through a dummy vendor account labeled as regional marketing expenses. He used those stolen funds to finance the down payment on his Porsche. He used the cash to purchase vintage Rolex watches. He paid for weekend trips to Las Vegas while claiming he was attending hospitality conventions. He bled the place dry, Nia said, the disgust evident in the sharp clip of her words. He used my name to secure the initial credit lines, and he used your labor to generate the cash flow. He stole from both of us to fund an illusion. I leaned against a concrete pillar. The sheer scale of his theft settled over me. I had suspected he was skimming to cover his gambling debts, but $400,000 was a fatal hemorrhage. I also looked at the payroll registry. Nia continued, her tone softened by a fraction of a degree, shifting from corporate executioner to a woman acknowledging another woman's invisible labor. I saw your salary, Clara. $45,000 a year to generate $3 million in revenue. I saw the 80-hour weeks on your time cards. I saw that you personally paid the meat supplier out of your own checking account last month just to keep the doors open. A tight knot in my chest, a knot I had carried for 8 years, finally began to loosen. For the first time, someone with real power looked at the numbers and recognized the truth. Someone saw the weight I had been carrying. I am not calling to negotiate on his behalf, Nia said. I am calling to give you the timeline. My lawyers filed the divorce petition 30 minutes ago. The couriers are serving him the papers at the restaurant right now. I have changed the locks on the condo. I have frozen his access to my credit accounts. He is walking into the Friday dinner service with zero capital, zero inventory, and a stack of legal documents demanding the return of my initial investments. I listened to the steady, lethal precision of her plan. She was dismantling his safety net with a few swift phone calls. I want to thank you, Clara, Nia added. By pulling your intellectual property, you forced him into a corner. You made him desperate enough to ask me for money, which triggered the audit. You saved me from wasting another decade on a parasite. You do not owe me any thanks, I replied. My voice echoed slightly in the empty warehouse. We both survived the same trap. There was a brief pause on the line, the kind of pause shared between two people standing over the wreckage of an empire they did not build. Finish the job, Nia said. Her voice carried the weight of a final verdict. Do not let them guilt you. Do not let them negotiate. Crush that restaurant into dust. She ended the call. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked around the massive 8,000 square foot space. The afternoon sun angled through the tall industrial windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The oaken vine was dead. The audit had severed the final artery. Julian had attempted to use his wife as a shield, and instead he had handed her the sword. I slid the phone back into my pocket, picked up my pen, and signed my approval on the new kitchen blueprints. The demolition of the past was complete. It was time to build. Thursday evening carries a distinct scent in the restaurant industry. It smells of hot metal, reduced stock, and raw anticipation. But inside the dining room of the Oaken Vine, the air smelt like burning cash masked by imported lilies. Julian had organized a VIP relaunch party. He invited 30 local food critics, lifestyle bloggers, and independent angel investors. He needed a narrative shift.
He needed the city to believe the sudden menu changes were a brilliant pivot toward modern cuisine rather than a desperate scramble to survive my legal injunction. To fund this illusion, my parents committed financial suicide. I knew this because David, my former sous chef who still grabbed beers with the front of house staff, texted me the details. Richard and Diane had bypassed traditional banks, which would never underwrite a loan in 48 hours, and went straight to a predatory private lender. They secured a high-interest hard money loan, signing over the remaining equity in their residential home as collateral. They bet their actual roof on this single night. They bought imported Wagyu beef, rented crystal chandeliers, and hired a string quartet to play near the bar. They were attempting to buy back the prestige they had casually thrown into the fryer grease just 2 weeks earlier. I did not enter through the alley delivery door. I pulled up to the front curb in a sleek black sedan driven by Elias Thorne. The valet rushed forward to open the door. I stepped onto the pavement wearing a tailored black evening dress. I handed my coat to the host standing in the foyer. The host, a young woman who used to watch me scrub the grease traps, stared at me with wide eyes. She did not ask for my name. She simply pushed open the heavy mahogany double doors. I did not walk in alone. Elias Thorne stepped through the threshold beside me. He wore a dark, unstructured suit and carried a presence that instantly altered the gravity of the room. A lifestyle blogger near the host stand stopped mid-sentence. A prominent food critic from the Chicago Tribune lowered his wine glass. Everyone in the local culinary scene knew Elias. He was the kingmaker. If Elias dined at your establishment, you earned a Michelin star consideration. If he walked out, you closed your doors within a year. Julian stood near the center of the room. He held a flute of champagne, laughing at a joke made by a minor real estate developer. His tailored suit looked a fraction too tight across the shoulders. His smile held a rigid, brittle edge. He turned his head toward the entrance. The laugh died in his throat. His face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He thrust his glass into the hands of a passing waiter and marched toward the foyer. He did not look at Elias. His vision narrowed entirely on me. He stopped 2 feet away. He lowered his voice to a harsh, ragged whisper. "What are you doing here?" Julian demanded. "You are not on the guest list. You need to leave before I have security drag you out to the curb." I did not step back. I looked at the sweat beading near his hairline. "I am a guest of Mr. Thorne," I replied. My tone remained conversational. Julian finally registered the man standing beside me. His eyes widened slightly. He recognized the investor he had pitched a year ago, the man who had rejected his fabricated business plan without a second thought. Julian tried to pivot. He forced a smile that looked like a facial spasm. "Mr. Thorne," Julian said, his voice tightening, "we are honored to have you, but there is an ongoing legal matter regarding my sister. She is a disgruntled former employee. I must ask her to step outside so we can proceed with the tasting." Elias looked at Julian the way a person looks at a stain on a fresh tablecloth. "Clara is my executive chef and my business partner," Elias stated. "Where she goes, I go. If you want her out, you lose the only credibility you have in this room." Julian opened his mouth to argue. His hands formed tight fists at his sides. He raised his arm, signaling the floor manager across the room to intervene. He never got the chance to give the order. The sharp, ringing sound of a silver spoon striking crystal cut through the ambient noise of the dining room. Everyone turned. Nia stood at the center table. She wore a sharp white pantsuit. The string quartet stopped playing. The low hum of conversation vanished. 30 guests turned their attention to the woman who commanded the focal point of the room. Julian exhaled a breath of relief. He assumed his wealthy wife was stepping in to save the evening, to lend her corporate authority to his fragile kingdom. He abandoned his standoff with Elias and hurried toward the center table. "Nia, honey," Julian said, projecting his voice for the critics to hear. "Thank you. Please assure our guests that the new menu is going to elevate their dining experience tonight." Nia did not look at him. She looked at the heavy leather folder resting on the white linen in front of her. She picked it up. She turned her gaze to the crowd. Her eyes were calm, analytical, and devoid of any spousal warmth.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Nia began. Her voice carried the practiced lethal clarity of a boardroom executive terminating a fraudulent CEO. You are invited here tonight to invest in the future of the Oak and Vine. Before you write a single check or publish a single review, you deserve to understand the financial realities of this operation. Julian stopped walking, his forced smile fractured. Nia, what are you doing? Nia ignored him. She unclasped the leather folder. She pulled out a thick stack of printed spreadsheets. She dropped them onto the table. The heavy thud echoed in the silent room. This is an independent forensic audit of the restaurant operating accounts, Nia announced. The math tells a very specific story. Over the past 36 months, the general manager of this establishment diverted $400,000 of company revenue into a phantom marketing account. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. A city councilman set his plate of appetizers down on a cocktail table. The food critic pulled a pen from his breast pocket and began writing. Nia continued, her tone relentless. That money did not go toward ingredient sourcing or staff wages. It financed personal luxury vehicles. It funded gambling trips to Nevada. It purchased designer watches. The culinary success of this restaurant was built entirely on the unpaid labor of his sister, Clara, who was starved of resources while he bled the foundation dry. Julian raised his hands, his chest heaved. He looked around the room with wild, panicked eyes. She is confused, Julian stammered. The accounts are complicated. It was a business reinvestment strategy. Nia picked up a second document from the folder. It was bound by a blue legal cover. A business strategy implies competence, Nia stated. You lack the intelligence for basic embezzlement. You left a digital paper trail a first-year accounting student could follow. My father pushed through the crowd. Richard looked pale, his hands shaking as he reached the center table. Nia, please. He kept his voice low, begging. Not in front of the investors. We can fix the ledgers. We can handle this privately. You mortgaged your house to buy Wagyu beef for a room full of strangers, Richard, Nia replied. You do not know how to fix anything. You only know how to lie. She turned her attention back to the crowd. She held up the blue legal document. As of this afternoon, Nia declared, her voice ringing off the brick walls, I have formally filed for divorce. I am withdrawing all current and future capital investments from this family. My legal team has initiated proceedings to recover the stolen marital assets. I advise anyone in this room holding a checkbook to keep it firmly closed. She dropped the divorce petition on top of the audit report. She did not wait for a response. Nia picked up her designer handbag, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the front entrance. The crowd parted for her like water. She walked past Julian without a single glance. She passed my parents, who stood frozen like statues in a museum of their own failures. As Nia reached the front doors, she stopped beside me. She offered a brief, professional nod. The demolition is complete, Nia said quietly. She pushed the heavy mahogany doors open and walked out into the Chicago night. I turned my attention back to the dining room. The silence was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating stillness of a funeral. 30 guests, the people my parents had bet their home on impressing, stared at the Farrow family. They did not look angry. They looked embarrassed. They looked at Julian and Richard as if they were watching a pathetic clown show. A prominent investor near the bar quietly placed his unfinished drink on the counter. He buttoned his coat and walked out. The food critic followed, sliding his notebook back into his pocket. Within 60 seconds, a mass exodus began. The guests abandoned the imported beef and the crystal glasses. They filed out the door in a quiet, organized retreat, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius of a financial scandal. Diane collapsed into a velvet chair. She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, but no one rushed to comfort her. Richard stared at the divorce papers resting on the table, calculating the exact moment he lost his house to the bank. Julian stood in the center of the empty floor. The relaunch party was over before the first course was served. He looked at the shattered remains of his fake empire. Then he looked at me. I did not offer a pitying smile. I did not gloat. I simply stood next to Elias Thorne, an owner of a new enterprise, watching a thief realize he had finally run out of things to steal. The heavy mahogany door swung shut behind Nia. The sharp click of the latch echoed across the dining room, sealing the remaining guest inside the wreckage. The mass exodus halted. Perhaps 20 local investors, lifestyle bloggers, and food critics stood frozen near their tables. They were trapped in the blast radius, unsure whether to walk out or wait for the dust to settle. My father recognized the hesitation. Richard had spent 30 years at a regional bank convincing people to trust him with their money. He knew how to read a room. He knew that silence was a vacuum, and whoever filled it first controlled the narrative. He turned his attention away from the exit and locked his eyes on me. His face was pale, the skin around his jaw sagging, but he straightened his spine. He raised his hands, palms open, adopting the universal gesture of a man asking for mercy. "Clara," he said. His voice trembled with practiced grief. He projected it perfectly, ensuring every critic in the back row could hear the heartbreak in his tone. "How can you stand there and do this? How can you be so cruel to your own blood?" He walked slowly toward the center of the room, putting himself directly under the rented crystal chandelier. He was setting a stage. "We gave you a place to work. We gave you a kitchen when you had nothing. Your mother and I sacrificed our retirement to keep this roof over your head, to give you a canvas for your food. And you repay us by bringing a stranger in here to humiliate your brother?" A low whisper rippled through the remaining guests. A woman near the bar shifted her weight and looked at me with a flicker of doubt. This was the predator's favorite trick. When caught in a lie, pivot to victimhood, make the audience question the retaliation rather than the original crime. He wanted the room to see an ungrateful daughter destroying a family business out of petty spite. I did not break eye contact. I did not raise my voice. I took 2 steps forward, closing the distance between us. The air smelled of roasted garlic, wilted lilies, and desperation. "You gave me a kitchen," I repeated. The words hung in the quiet room. "You gave me a broken exhaust fan and a $45,000 salary. I gave you $3 million in annual revenue." Richard opened his mouth to interrupt. I cut him off. "Do not speak right now. You wanted an audience? You have one." I turned my head slightly, making sure the food critic from the Tribune was listening. "For 8 years, I worked 14-hour shifts. I managed the vendor accounts. I scrubbed the grease traps on Sunday mornings. I created the 10 recipes that kept this building out of foreclosure. You did not give me a canvas. You handed me a sinking ship and forced me to bail water while Julian sat in the dining room drinking $200 bottles of wine." Julian stood near the host stand, his face slick with sweat. He looked like a cornered animal, eyes darting toward the exits. "You saw the audit," I said, my voice striking the brick walls. "You know he stole $400,000 from the operating fund. You knew he was draining the vendor accounts to pay for his luxury car lease and his gambling debts. But you chose to protect him. You chose to bleed me dry to subsidize a thief rather than acknowledge what I am actually worth to this family." Richard's hands dropped to his sides. The victim routine was failing. The crowd was no longer whispering. They were staring at him with undisguised disgust. The blogger at the bar reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and began typing furiously. Richard tried a different tactic. Authority. "You are an ungrateful child," Richard spat. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold, desperate fury. "You think you won because Naya took her money and left? You think you hold all the cards because you locked away a few recipes? I still own this restaurant. I hold the lease to this building. We will rebrand. We will hire a chef who knows how to follow orders. You will be forgotten by next month." I looked at my father. He really believed it. He believed that the physical structure, the oak tables, the brick walls, and the address on the street were his permanent domain. He thought he could simply sweep the shattered glass away, secure a new line of credit, and open the doors for lunch tomorrow. He was clinging to the bricks because the soul of the business had already walked out. I turned my head and looked at Elias Thorne. I gave him a single, brief nod.
Elias had been standing near the coat check, observing the confrontation with the detached interest of a man watching a documentary about insects. He stepped forward. His leather boots made a rhythmic, heavy sound on the hardwood floor. He reached into the inside pocket of his unstructured suit jacket. He pulled out a folded document printed on thick legal paper. Elias did not look at Julian. He did not look at my mother. He walked directly up to Richard. "Mr. Farrow," Elias said. His voice was gravelly, quiet, and carried the weight of a judge delivering a sentence. "You do not own this restaurant. You merely occupy it." Elias handed the document to my father. Richard took it automatically, his eyes darting down to the bold text at the top of the page. "My holding company, Thorne Hospitality Group, acquires distressed commercial real estate debt," Elias stated. "I have wanted this corner location for a year. So, we quietly purchased the defaulted mortgage portfolio on this building from your regional bank 3 months ago. You have been ignoring their warnings, assuming a mid-tier bank wouldn't move quickly to foreclose. But I am not a bank." Richard stared at the paper, his mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The document trembled in his hands. "As the primary holder of your defaulted mortgage," Elias continued, his tone devoid of any sympathy, "I am activating the immediate foreclosure and possession clause. That document is a formal notice of seizure. Because your account is severely delinquent, you have exactly 1 week to clear your personal belongings from the premises before my demolition crews arrive to gut the interior." The silence that followed was heavy and total. It was the sound of an empire turning to ash. Diane, who had been standing near the edge of the dining room clutching her silk wrap, let out a sharp gasp. Her knees buckled. She collapsed into a velvet dining chair. She did not cry. She just stared at the floor, her chest heaving. She realized the truth before anyone else did. The predatory hard money loan they secured against their residential home to fund this ridiculous party was now tied to a dead business. Private lenders do not move at the sluggish pace of traditional banks. Without the restaurant revenue to cover the exorbitant weekly interest, the lenders would seize the house within a matter of weeks. Julian stood by the host stand. He looked at the rented crystal chandeliers, the imported lilies, the empty wine glasses left behind by the fleeing investors. He had spent 3 years playing the role of a brilliant general manager, and he was about to be locked out of his own stage. He had no wife, no car, no title, and nowhere to hide. Richard looked up from the eviction notice. He looked at Elias, then at me. The defiance was gone. The fury was erased. There was nothing left but a hollow, empty realization. He had no recipes to cook. He had no investors to charm. He had no daughter-in-law to fund his son's lifestyle. And now, he had no building. I did not wait for an apology. Apologies are useless when the damage is permanent. I turned my back on my family, took Elias by the arm, and walked out the front doors into the cool Chicago night. 6 months pass. The Chicago winter arrives, turning the wind sharp and the skies a pale, unforgiving gray. I drove past the old neighborhood yesterday afternoon on my way to a supplier meeting. I did not plan the route, but when the familiar brick facade came into view, I slowed my car to a halt at the red light. Elias Thorne did not waste time. The heavy mahogany doors of the oak and vine were gone, replaced by industrial steel barriers. The demolition crew had already gutted the interior. Through the dusty front windows, I could see the exposed concrete floor where the crystal chandeliers used to cast their amber glow. A worker in a yellow hard hat was tossing debris into a rusted metal dumpster parked in the alley. The ornate brass sign that once displayed my family's surname had been unbolted, leaving behind a pale rectangle of unweathered brick. The physical structure was being erased, preparing to become a modern tech office space. The empire was gone. The financial collapse of my parents was a matter of simple, brutal mathematics. Without the daily cash flow generated by my menu, the hard money loan they took out to fund Julian's disastrous relaunch party defaulted almost immediately.
The private equity firm holding their deed did not care about my father's previous career in finance. They did not care about his tailored suits or his country club memberships. They cared about the collateral. The house in the suburbs went into foreclosure. Richard and Diane were forced to liquidate their assets to avoid declaring total bankruptcy. David, my chef de cuisine, still talks to some of the old neighborhood residents. He told me they held an estate sale over a rainy weekend in October.
Neighbors walked through my childhood home, haggling over my mother's Persian rugs, her imported leather sofas, and the dining room table where my father used to issue his demands. Today, Richard and Diane rent a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the ground floor of a decaying complex near O'Hare Airport. The walls are thin, vibrating every time a commercial jet flies overhead. The heating system is temperamental. The man who used to tap a silver spoon against a crystal flute to command the attention of local politicians now spends his mornings arguing with a property manager about a leaking radiator. Diane no longer hosts book clubs. She works the front desk at a busy, underfunded dental clinic in a strip mall. She spends 8 hours a day answering phones, scheduling root canals, and dealing with angry patients complaining about insurance copays. The emerald silk dresses have been replaced by generic medical scrubs. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, are dry from industrial hand sanitizer. She is learning the true cost of an honest day's labor decades later than she should have. Julian's descent was the steepest, a vertical drop from the penthouse to the pavement. Nia executed the divorce with ruthless corporate efficiency. During the settlement hearings, her lawyers introduced the forensic audit as evidence of marital dissipation of assets. The judge reviewed the ledgers detailing the $400,000 Julian had siphoned from the restaurant to fund his gambling and luxury leases. The court ordered Julian to repay the stolen funds from his share of the marital estate, which effectively left him with nothing. Nia kept the Gold Coast condo. She kept her investment portfolio. Julian was handed a stack of legal bills and the clothes in his closet. The Porsche lease was terminated. The Rolex watches were seized and liquidated by the attorneys. With his documented history of embezzlement exposed in the public record of the divorce proceedings, Julian became a walking liability. No reputable hospitality group in the state of Illinois would hire him. He could not leverage his fake title of general manager. He needed cash to survive. And desperation forces people into environments they once mocked. Currently, my brother works the night shift at a regional fast food drive-thru on the south side of the city. He wears a stiff polyester uniform that permanently smells of old grease and synthetic cheese. From 10 at night until 6 in the morning, he stands under harsh fluorescent lights, pulling frozen French fries out of cardboard boxes and dropping them into vats of boiling oil. He answers to a 22-year-old shift supervisor who monitors his break times with a stopwatch. Julian finally secured the frozen ingredient supply chain he always wanted. He is executing it perfectly. They still try to reach through the glass, attempting to rebuild the bridge they burned. Last Tuesday, an email bypassed my spam filters. The sender address belonged to Diane. The subject line read, "Healing Our Family." I opened it while standing in my new kitchen, drinking a shot of espresso. It was 4 pages of dense, rambling text. She wrote about the upcoming holidays, noting how cold the apartment gets at night. She said she missed the smell of my cooking. She used the word misunderstanding 3 times in the first 2 paragraphs. She asked if we could sit down for a coffee, just the 2 of us, to put the past behind us. I read the words carefully. I looked for accountability. I looked for an acknowledgement of the cease and desist, the stolen vendor funds, the dirty apron thrown at my shoes. I found nothing. There was no apology for the actions, only regret for the consequences. She did not miss her daughter. She missed her chef. She wanted the comfort of her old life back, and she needed me to finance the reconstruction. I did not type a response. I did not forward the message to my lawyer. I moved my cursor, clicked the trash icon, and emptied the deleted folder. The digital file vanished. The action took 2 seconds, and my heart rate never elevated. I set my coffee cup down and turned to face my kitchen. Not a cramped prep station with a broken exhaust fan. The kitchen at the Sovereign. Our grand opening in the West Loop occurred 3 months ago. Elias Thorne kept his word. The space is a cathedral of culinary engineering.
We built an 8,000 square foot facility featuring vaulted ceilings, exposed brick walls, and a cooking line equipped with custom French stoves that burn with precise, unwavering blue flames. We installed a glass-walled dry aging room for the beef. I own 20% of the holding company. Elias handles the real estate negotiations and the investors. I handle the food, the staff, and the vision. David is my chef de cuisine, earning double what my father paid him, with full medical and dental benefits. Mateo runs the prep team, no longer working double shifts just to make his rent. The kitchen operates like a Swiss watch, quiet, focused, and lethal in its execution. Last week, the Michelin Guide announced its annual selections for Chicago. The dining room was empty when the phone rang. I answered it. Elias stood next to me. David and Mateo leaned against the expediting counter. The Sovereign earned its first Michelin star. When the heavy metal plaque arrived in a velvet box 2 days later, I did not hang it in the front lobby for the guests to admire. I took a drill and bolted it directly to the stainless steel wall above the kitchen expediting station, right where my crew can see it every time they plate a dish. It belongs to the people who sweat for it. Our reservation book is locked solid for the next 14 months. The phone lines open at noon, and within 10 minutes, every available table is claimed. People fly in from New York, London, and Tokyo. They sit in the ambient light of the dining room, paying premium prices for the pistachio-crusted halibut and the smoked maple lamb ribs. I walk the dining room floor occasionally, stopping at tables, asking guests about their meals. I do not wear a dirty dishwashing apron. I wear a crisp, custom-tailored white chef coat with my name embroidered in dark charcoal thread over the left breast. Clara Farrow, executive chef, owner. I sit at the chef's counter after the Friday dinner service ends. The staff has gone home. The deep cleaning is finished. The room smells of roasted sage, expensive wine, and quiet success. I pour a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, swirl the dark liquid, and look out the front windows at the city lights. My family did not love me. They loved the engine that powered their lifestyle, but they despised the mechanic who kept her hands dirty maintaining it. When I finally took the engine away, their vehicle stopped moving. I did not destroy their lives. I simply removed my recipes from their equation, allowing their own monumental incompetence to calculate the final sum. The most devastating retaliation is not a shouting match. It is a cold, calculated exit. Never compromise your standards to accommodate someone else's mediocrity. Never allow guilt to manipulate you into funding your own disrespect. And never, under any circumstances, set yourself on fire just to keep your enemies warm. If my story of dropping that apron and letting their fake empire collapse resonated with your own experiences, I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me down in the comments exactly how you finally drew your line in the sand against toxic relatives. Hit that like button, subscribe to Sweet Life Drama for more stories about people who stop apologizing and start taking back their power. And I will see you in the next video.